to pack it all in a box, names, codes, faces, and never open it again. But you don't forget a city where every step felt like a test, every silence like a trap. I walk past train stations now, and my hand still twitches toward the inside of my coat instinctively. That reflex never left. Neither did the gilt dot. It's funny people think espionage is about knowing things. The truth? It's about not knowing. About holding a piece of something you'll never see complete. I carried envelopes I never opened. I watched men disappear after one whispered phrase. I smiled at people whose deaths I might have signed with. A nod, and some of those names. I still hear them in my sleep. You wouldn't believe me if I told you what was inside that envelope at Bahnhof Zoo. Hell, sometimes I don't believe it either. But it happened. It happened. And once you've seen it, it doesn't leave you. You burn the paper. You drink to forget. But it stays in your breath, in your hands. Before I regret saying any of this, hit that like button. Subscribe if this is already making you uncomfortable, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from and what time it is. I like knowing where in the world people still dare to listen to secrets like these. They never said why it had to be Bahnhof Zoo. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe that was the point. The message arrived that morning through a burner codebook we hadn't used since the Cuban mess. Just a sentence scratched onto the margin of an old weather report. Line 3, third bench, 647. Pick it up. No deviation. Station was still waking up when League. The fluorescent lights above the U-band flickered like bad memories. I passed a blind saxophonist near the western entrance, the kind who always played just out of tune, either by accident or design. My coat collar was turned up, not for the cold, but for the anonymity. I blended in with the silence. Except I wasn't silent inside. Inside, I was loud with suspicion. A drop without context? No name, no code phrase, no confirmation. But I went. Sat on the second bench first, pretending to look for a cigarette I didn't have. Just long enough to scan the third one. It was wooden, aged, varnish peeling like skin. The underside had been carved recently. My fingers found the rough edge, slid underneath, and there it was. A thin brown envelope, taped flat with surgical precision. It made no sound when I peeled it off. No resistance. Just ... wait. Not physical. Something deeper. The kind you don't name. I didn't open it there. Instead, I stood and dropped it inside a folded newspaper. I walked the length of the platform once more, for rhythm. Repetition keeps suspicion away. A woman in uniform glanced up from her magazine. A man with a blue scarf coughed twice deliberately. I ignored it. Not my pattern, not my business. Outside, the city hadn't noticed me. The air was sharp with diesel and morning bread. I crossed Hardenbergstræde without looking back. That's a rule they drill into you. Once you're out, you're out. Glancing over your shoulder is how you invite ghosts. Still, I took the long way home. I avoided Kurfürstendamm, cut through back alleys, stopped twice to pretend I was lost. On Bleibtreustrasse, a black Moskvich was parked where it shouldn't have been. Windows fogged, engine cold. I paused, lit a match, and let it die before lighting the cigarette. Nothing moved inside the car, but I knew that look. Surveillance in standby. Someone had received a different message that morning. When I reached my building, I waited outside the door. 5 minutes. That's what they told us to do when we felt uncertain. Let time expose the trap. But no door creaked, no footsteps echoed. Just me and the envelope, pulsing like a second heart inside my coat. I entered with care. No signs of entry. No scratches near the lock. The plant in the hallway hadn't been moved. Small details. Vital ones. In my kitchen, I poured water I didn't drink. Just the motion of it helped me breathe. Then I laid the envelope down like something sacred, or cursed. It had no markings, no address, not even a crease. The kind of paper that felt older than it looked, almost ... sterile. I stared at it for 12 minutes, exactly 12. Then I walked away. I turned on the radio static, switched to the BBC weather. Fine, normal. Berlin was good at pretending to be normal. Then I finally picked up the envelope again. I pressed the corners gently. Nothing hard. No cassette, no film, just paper. I could feel the edge of a fold. Thin, crisp, carefully sealed. But I didn't open it that day. Not yet. Something about the way it waited on my table. Like it knew I wasn't ready. And part of me thinks maybe I never would have been. But that was before the old man in the hat appeared on the platform. Before he watched me without blinking. Before I started to wonder if that envelope had eyes. I returned to Bahnhof Zoo the next morning, not because I had to. No new orders. No follow-up. Just ... Something gnawed at me. I needed to walk the same ground again, see if it felt different. It did. The platform at 7:12 had that damp winter smell metal, mildew, the breath of too many people held in tight spaces. The kind of scent you learn to distrust. It wasn't raining, but the cold had teeth. I kept my hands in my coat, not for warmth, just in case. That's when I noticed him. Not suddenly. He was already there when I arrived. A man in his 70s, maybe older, standing near the tracks, one hand resting gently on the metal pole that marked the edge of the line. Hat too clean for someone that age, shoes too polished. He wasn't reading, wasn't waiting, just standing. I'd seen that posture before, the way he shifted his weight, always to the same foot, the way his eyes moved without moving his head. Old tradecraft, not Soviet, not ours either. Possibly East German, but I couldn't place it exactly. And that was worse than if I had. Uncertainty is more dangerous than knowledge. It makes your instincts louder than your logic. So I stayed. I stood 5 meters from him, stared at the empty tracks as if I were late for something. The envelope burned cold in my memory. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't been alone yesterday. Maybe he was watching me then too. At 7:12, the train came. People shuffled. Doors hissed. The old man didn't move, not even an inch. That's what made it terrifying. No glances, no adjustments, just presence. A young girl walked past him. He didn't flinch. A uniformed ticket inspector turned his back briefly, then looked again. Still there. The train left. The man stayed. I moved to a bench farther down the platform. I pulled out a book I didn't intend to read. My eyes flicked up every 6 seconds. He never once looked at me. And yet, I felt watched. Not studied. Watched. Like an insect under glass. That's when I noticed it. His left hand was gloved. The right was bare. A signal. We used that trick in Saigon. 1 glove means drop zone's hot. 2 gloves means abort. No gloves means proceed. This wasn't Saigon. This was Berlin. And I wasn't part of any active cell. So why was I being warned? I left the station without riding the train. Past the blind saxophonist again. He wasn't playing this time. He nodded at me once. I didn't return it. I couldn't afford to. Back in my apartment, I opened the window. Needed air. Didn't help. The room reeked of paranoia cigarette. Smoke, wet wool, and the bitter tang of fear. I hadn't felt it in years. Not like this. The kind of fear that doesn't scream, it waits. Slow, patient, precise. I boiled water and let it cool. A habit from training. Something to do with your hands when your thoughts become weapons. I thought about calling Langley. But the last time I did that, the line rang twice and went dead. No point. I wasn't sure who was answering anymore, or who was listening. Instead, I picked up the envelope again. Didn't open it, just held it to my chest, like a second heart. My pulse slowed, or maybe I stopped noticing it. That's when I knew I'd crossed a line. This wasn't just a drop. It was a warning. A dare dot, and somewhere in that station, behind polished shoes and expressionless eyes, was someone who knew my face. Knew I'd taken the bait, and wasn't finished watching me yet. I didn't plan to open the envelope that night. I had every intention of locking it in the metal drawer I kept under the floorboards. Let it sit untouched, like all the other ghosts I'd archived over the years. But something in my chest wouldn't shut up. Like a second voice, raspier, more reckless, I turned off the radio. Killed every light except the one above the stove. It was always that bulb yellow, humming, half dead. It made the apartment feel like a confession booth. Or a morgue dot, the envelope felt heavier than before. I slid a letter opener under the seal. It parted clean. Inside were 5 sheets, each folded with surgical care. No markings outside, no blood, no dust. Just paper. I unfolded the first page, columns of names, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, each followed by an address, city, sector, and dates. No months, no years, just numbers. 9.14, 11.03, 12.22. Some names had a check mark. Others had an X, one had both. Next to that, a symbol I hadn't seen since Vienna 2 circles, overlapping. Back then, it meant something to do with internal clearance. But here, it reeked of finality. My breath caught. I didn't blink. I recognized. 3 names. Not just recognized, knew. People I'd worked with. One had trained me in Bavaria. One had vanished in '59 after a botched intercept near Minsk. The third was supposed to be in Brazil, under a new identity. All 3 had dates. All 3 were marked with an X, a death list. I stood so fast the chair scraped tile. My knees locked. I had to remind myself to breathe. I scanned for anything that might make sense. Was this KGB? Stasi? Or something even worse, ours? I turned to the second page. Same layout, different names. Then something stopped me cold. Page 3. Third line down. A name in block letters. James R. Teller. It meant nothing at first. Then I remembered Teller was Langley's man in Prague. Disavowed in '61 after a failed recruitment. Last I'd heard, he'd been extracted. But there he was, on this list. No check, no X, no date. Pending. I kept going, one name after another. Some sounded Eastern Bloc, others Western. One was French. One was Israeli. One, God help me, was German-American. I'd seen him laugh once over beer. I never wanted to see that laugh again. At the bottom of the 4th page, a note. Handwritten. Just 4 words. Observe. Do not intervene. And below that, a faint imprint of what looked like a fingerprint. Smudged. Intentionally, I sat down. Or rather, collapsed. My knees just gave out. The kind of collapse that feels like surrender. Was this a kill list? A hit? Schedule? Or worse, was it an archive? A ledger of what had already happened, dressed up like a mission to make us feel in control? I flipped to the last page. No list this time. Just a diagram. Simple, crude. A floor plan. My floor plan. My building. My apartment. The ventilation system. Arrows pointing inward. I dropped the page like it burned me. My skin flushed. My throat tightened. That sound in my ears like pressure building behind my eyes. I looked at the window. Still closed. No shadows. No clicks. I whispered out loud, like an idiot. Why me? No answer. And then, with hands I no longer trusted, I folded everything back into the envelope. Only this time, the weight wasn't metaphorical. Now it was real. Now it had names. And one of them was still missing. I told myself not to look again. Once you see a list like that, the decent part of you wants to unsee it. Burn it. Pretend it was someone else's problem. But that part of me, if it ever existed, didn't make it out of Saigon. So I opened the envelope again. I flattened the third page under the stove light. I ran my finger down the edge, this time slower, looking not for the names, but for anything that had been missed. And then I saw it. A tiny smudge in the bottom corner. At first glance, it looked like a mistake. Like someone's hand had slipped while handling a pen, but it wasn't ink. It was deliberate. Thin, sharp. A symbol at first, then a shape, and finally a name not written out, but signed, not with letters, with a Cody name, Perseus. I froze. I hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. And even then, it wasn't spoken out loud. It was whispered. In reports, in burned files, Perseus was. Well, let's just say he wasn't supposed to exist. Back in '61, he was our golden ghost. An American agent embedded so deep in Soviet operations, we didn't know whether he was spying for us or them. He played both sides, always one step ahead, until one day he vanished. Officially, presumed dead, off record, burned, irrecoverable. We mourned him like we mourned useful tools, quietly, efficiently. But seeing that Cody name now, in that handwriting, felt like being haunted by someone I helped bury. I pulled a file from my private archive, buried behind the stove tiles. Folder marked Externals. Inside, tucked between outdated maps and photographs that had bled from humidity, I found his dossier, or what was left of it. Photo, burned, report, redacted, but one detail survived. A signature we'd once found at a drop site in Vienna. Same pen stroke, same curvature on the S. The analysts called it a fabrication. Said the Soviets were trying to bait us with ghosts. But it wasn't bait. It was his. Same as the one I now held in my hand, which meant one of two things. Either someone had access to a signature the agency buried decades ago, or Perseus was still alive. The idea shouldn't have rattled me. Ghosts don't rattle you when you've lived long enough among the dead. But this one was different. This one knew me. I pulled out a note I'd written once in Cyprus. A warning. I'd used the phrase silent field as a code for compromised ground. Only 2 other agents ever used it. One died in '67. The other disappeared in Berlin. Guess what symbol was scribbled on the back of this envelope? 2 interlocking circles. Silent field. And just like that, the noise in my head started again. The low hum of realization. If this was Perseus's doing, then the list wasn't just intelligence, it was theater. A performance staged for one audience. M.E. And if he was still operating, that meant he'd chosen to resurface now. In Berlin. In my hands. Not a coincidence. A message? I don't know what scared me more, that he was alive, or that I had no idea what side he was on. I placed the envelope back in its hiding place. Sat down in the dark. Let the silence stretch until the clock ticked past midnight. Somewhere out there, a man I once trusted was deciding what I should know and when I should disappear. And that signature? That wasn't a mistake. It was permission. I didn't send. The whole thing. That would have been suicide. Langley doesn't reward transparency. They reward containment. Protocol said to isolate the information, verify it in segments, send a partial extract through the encrypted line, and wait for acknowledgement. That's what I did. I pulled one-page names I didn't recognize, no connections to me, and transmitted it in pieces through the narrowband relay on Schluter Stage. I used the old code, the one no one had touched since '58. It was buried deep, 2 keys past the usual cipher. A code meant to wake up ghosts. Then I waited. The first day passed. Nothing. That's not unusual. The system was designed to ignore false pings. But by the 3rd day, something began to twist in my gut. Not fear, no. Fear is useful. This was silence. And silence in this job is worse than noise. I checked transmission logs. No confirmation. No rejection. Just ... absence. Like I dropped a stone in a well and never heard the splash. I called the fallback line. Rang once, then static. The last time that happened, it meant one of 2 things. Either the line had been cut or someone had chosen not to answer. I tried another route. The London desk. But the contact code was void, obsolete, as if someone had gone through and erased entire branches of the network overnight. The worst part? I still needed to believe that someone in Langley knew. That someone had seen the partial list and understood what it meant. But they didn't reach out. No encrypted memo, no dead drop, no cleaning crew, just me. And a silence so heavy, it started to feel personal. I spent hours staring at the envelope again. Not reading it, just looking at it, like maybe it would start talking back. Like maybe the paper itself could explain why everyone had gone quiet, or why the agency had suddenly lost interest in a list of planned executions. Many of them are. That's when I started asking the real question. Maybe they hadn't lost interest. Maybe they'd gone quiet because they already knew. I'd seen this before, in Cairo, in Istanbul. There's a certain type of silence that isn't ignorance, it's strategy. A gap left open just long enough to see who moves, who reacts. It's not about the information. It's about the person holding it. Me. What if they were watching me now? I checked the apartment again, thoroughly. Taps in the vent, fibers on the lock. Everything clean. Too clean. The last time my place looked this untouched, it was because someone else had already been inside and put everything back exactly as they'd found it. That's not a courtesy. That's a warning. On the 6th day, I wrote a letter. Not to Langley, to myself. A record. A timeline. If something happened, I wanted there to be a trail. I kept it behind the toilet tank. No one checks there anymore. That night, I dreamt of Vienna again. The safe house with the cracked mirror. The sound of shoes in the hall. Perseus, or someone like him, standing in the shadow and whispering, "You're just holding it for now." I woke up choking on my own name. The next morning, I burned the letter, because I knew somehow that Langley had received my message. They just decided not to answer. And that silence? That was the first real response. I went back to Bahnhof Zoo. Not to chase answers. I'd stopped believing in those, but to return the envelope to its place. Like putting a cursed object back where it belongs. I thought maybe, just maybe, by resetting the board, I could step off it. Let someone else play. The next move. It was early. Cold. The platform smelled of disinfectant and old bread. A cleaner pushed a wheeled cart, humming something Slavic and off-key. I nodded. He didn't nod back. I headed toward the bench, where I first found the envelope, 3rd down. Line 3. But it wasn't there. The bench was gone. In its place. An open gap in the tiled floor, sealed at the corners with red tape. No workers, no tools, just a void. Like someone had pulled up the wood and erased the memory of it. I stood there longer than I should have. Anyone watching would have seen a man staring at nothing, unsure of what he'd lost. And that's when I noticed them. 2 men. Suits, Overcoats, Soviet style, not the flashy kind. A practical kind gray, forgettable, issued. One stood near, the coffee machine, pretending to read the headline of a paper he never turned. The other lingered near the stairwell, too close to the emergency exit. Their posture gave them away. They weren't looking at me, but they weren't looking anywhere else either. Surveillance? Calm, casual, competent, not a confrontation. A reminder I'd crossed a line, and they wanted me to know it wasn't theirs. Turned on instinct and walked down the platform. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Like I had somewhere to be, even if I didn't. Outside the station, I took a breath that didn't go all the way down. The cold didn't help. It never does when the fear sits in your lungs. I walked 3 blocks without a plan. My hands stayed in my coat pockets, not because I was hiding anything, but because I was trying to keep them from shaking. I passed a bookshop I used to know. Closed now. Curtains drawn. For a second, I saw my reflection in the glass. Older than I remembered. Tired in ways I couldn't name. That night, I wrote nothing. Drank nothing. Just sat by the stove and listened. And that's when it started. A sound in the hall, not footsteps, absence. Like the hallway was being listened to, not walked through. A pressure in the air, a hesitation before silence. I moved to the empty. Something felt shifted, like the space outside my door had learned my name. And then, the echo. A voice, or maybe just the suggestion of one, repeated in my head. You don't return the message. You become it. I didn't sleep at dawn. I walked to the post office, bought a blank postcard, wrote nothing on it. Just dropped it in the outgoing box. Sometimes silence is all you can send. The call came 2 days later. I was at home, reading this same paragraph of a book I'd never finish when the phone rang once and stopped. Then again, and again. A rhythm. 3 rings. Silence. 1 ring. Silence. Then the line went live, but no voice, just a sound. A long, steady tone, high frequency. Almost like tinnitus. Familiar. Too familiar. We used it once in a buried protocol for compromised operations. An old system designed for one thing: internal resets. It meant someone had been flagged, and not for extraction. I dropped the receiver, not out of fear, out of instinct. That tone, that frequency, it wasn't just a signal. It was a verdict. Someone had activated it, and it had reached me. I didn't move for a full minute. I watched the phone, half expecting it to ring again. It didn't, but the silence it left behind wasn't normal. It was charged, like the air before a storm. I checked the line. It was still warm to the touch. Whoever called had been close, too close. That night, I didn't sleep in my apartment. I packed a small bag, no documents, no traceables. Just a burner lighter, a razor blade, 2,000 Deutschmarks in small notes, and a photo I hadn't looked at in years. Not because I missed her, because I needed to remember who I was before all this started. I walked across the city in the dark, took side streets, kept my profile low. My legs ached from tension, not distance. I ended up at Oscruce, a place no one in Langley would expect me to go. Too exposed, too civilian. That was the point. I stood on the platform, watching trains come and go. Families, lovers, the drunk, and the lost, all of them moving without fear. And there I was, frozen, invisible, listening for a tone that no one else could hear. I spotted a man near the ticket machine, back to me, hands deep in his coat. Then he turned briefly, and his face caught the light. I knew that face, or I thought I did. It was gone before I could confirm. But my heart didn't care about confirmation. It pounded like a metronome running. Out of time, I stayed on the platform until the last train rolled out. Empty. That's when I noticed the symbol, chalked under the bench near track 4. 2 circles, overlapping. Silent field. Again. I walked away slowly. Counted to 30 between every step. Didn't look back until I reached the stairs. No one followed. No one had to. The message was clear. I was no longer in the loop. I was the loop. Whatever this list was, whatever game Perseus or Langley, or whoever was playing, it wasn't about intelligence anymore. It was about control. Containment. And if that tone meant what I feared it meant, then someone somewhere had decided that I was now a risk. An error to be corrected. And the correction had already begun. I didn't want to hold onto it anymore. The list, the envelope, the weight. It had started to feel like a fuse short, already lit. Every second I kept it, I was closer to blowing up with it. So I made a decision, not out of bravery, out of exhaustion. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He used to work in the British sector, not officially. One of those freelancers MI6 denies using, but always seems to have on call. We'd crossed paths during a false defection op in Prague. He owed me, or at least he used to. I used the old code, left a red matchstick in the slot of a postbox near Hevelstrace. That was our signal. If he was alive, if he was still watching, he'd understand. 2 days later, I received a stamped letter from a bookstore that no longer existed. No words, just a clipped corner bottom right. That meant safe to proceed. So I went. I arrived at his flat just after dusk, Sector Britannico. Quiet street, 3 flights up. The door was slightly ajar. That should have been the first sign. I pushed it open with my left hand, the right one tight around the blade I carried in my coat lining. No resistance, no sound. Inside, the place smelled ... not decay. Something worse. Erasure. The furniture was there, but stripped, drawers empty, cushions opened, walls bare where photos had once been, and on the doorframe, sealed and fresh, wax, the insignia of the ministerium. For Stot's Siccherheit. The Stasi had been here, and not recently. This had been done methodically, quietly, like a surgery. No one was meant to survive. I stepped inside anyway. That was my second mistake. In the middle of the room, on the table, sat a single object, a teacup. Still warmed out. Someone had left it for me. Or had just left. I backed out, slowly. Every step like a heartbeat. I wasn't sure I deserved. Down the stairwell. I skipped every third step. An old habit from Saigon. If someone's tailing you, rhythm breaks help. At the bottom, I paused behind the mailboxes. Waited. No movement. But the silence had changed. It felt ... loaded. Outside. I didn't head home. That was no longer safe. I took the long route to the Tiergarten and found a bench near the old statue with the missing hand. That was our fallback rendezvous. I waited there until the cold bit through my skin. He never came. He never would. Knew then that the list hadn't changed hands. It had tried to ... and now whoever was on the other side of it, Stasi, Langley, Perseus, maybe all of them knew I'd tried to pass it, which meant I wasn't just a carrier anymore. I was a leak, and leaks don't live long in Berlin. I walked back into the city under yellow street lamps, trying to remember if I'd ever actually trusted the man I'd just risked everything for. I couldn't. Maybe he'd never existed in the way I remembered. Maybe none of us had. I don't know why I looked again. Maybe I thought I'd missed something. Maybe part of me hoped the names had changed, that I'd imagined them, that the pages had shifted while I slept. That kind of denial doesn't belong in our line of work. But by then, I wasn't working. I was just reacting. I sat on the floor. Of my apartment, the lights off. The envelope opened on page 3. The one with the X's. I read it slower this time, as if the ink might tell me something the letters couldn't. And there, halfway down, just above the fold my name clear typed. Not handwritten same font. Same spacing. Same cold distance and next to it. 11.19 no check. No X just a date. Future tense. I didn't move. Didn't breathe, not really. I'd seen execution lists before. They usually arrived through unofficial channels coded vague, always deniable, but they never included someone like me. Not directly, not typed so plainly. It was the kind of mistake no one made, unless it wasn't a mistake. I stared at the date 11. 19 no. Year just numbers, but I knew what it meant it. Was 6 days from now. That wasn't an oversight. That was a countdown. I stood up too fast. The blood rushed to my head, and I had to steady myself against the kitchen counter. My hands were damp, not from fear, from recognition. My name on that list didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a receipt, like someone confirming delivery. I'd been activated targeted and there was no protocol for this no warning in the manual for what to do when you're the objective. I tore through my old files, looked for anyone that might explain how this happened. Who signed the order? Who confirmed it? Who wanted me gone? But the real question echoed louder in my head. Who else knew? The moment your name appears on a list like that, you start seeing shadows in every hallway. Every face becomes a possibility. Every silence a trap. I left the apartment again, this time without locking the door. What would be the point? Walked the streets like a man already dead, tried to remember if I'd ever really mattered. I found myself at the river, near the old bridge where they used to do exchanges. Bodies for papers. Secrets for silence. Funny, I'd watched those trades. Happened a dozen times, but never once imagined I'd be on the table. I lit a cigarette, let it burn close to the filter. The smell reminded me of field briefings in Warsaw. My handler once told me, the minute your name ends up on a list, don't ask who put it there. Ask why it took so long. Maybe this was overdue. Maybe I'd survived too many cycles, too many bad nights, and worse compromises. But something inside me refused to accept that it was just punishment. Someone had put me on that list with intention. Not as revenge. Not as cleanup. As part of the game. And I still didn't know whose move it had been. I folded the page back into the envelope. Tore the corner. Wrote 3 words on the torn piece, in case anyone found it after I was gone. I saw it. Then I burned it. Not because I believed it would save me, but because I knew what came next, and I wasn't going to wait for it sitting still. The knock came at 3:06 a.m., not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2. Then silence. My hand went instantly to the drawer where I used to keep a pistol I'd already thrown into the canal. I didn't speak, didn't move for a full minute. Then again. Knock, 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 Pause. Knock, knock. A rhythm I hadn't heard in over a decade. The last time someone used it, we were in Saigon. Operation Silent Bridge. A black market handoff that went wrong in every possible way. Only 2 of us made it out. One of them was me. The other was him. I opened the door. Slowly. And there he was. Same eyes. Same crooked smile. Same scar above the right eyebrow. The years had thinned his frame, but the posture hadn't changed. He didn't ask to come in. Just stepped across the threshold like it was still 1964. I didn't say his name, because names don't belong to people like us anymore. He looked around, casually, like he'd just dropped by from down the hall. Then he said it. That list you found? It's not for circulation. It's for execution. He didn't sit. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't blink much either. I just stared at him, watching. The ghost of someone I once trusted tell me, flatly, that I'd stumbled into a machine that doesn't forgive curiosity. You're not supposed to have it, he added. You're supposed to carry it? That's all, like luggage. I wanted to ask who gave the order, who was running it. But I already knew the rules. If someone comes back from the dead to deliver a message, you don't get to ask questions. I lit a cigarette, offered him one. He waved it away. I quit, he said. When I saw what it costs, the silence stretched. I noticed how still he was, not tense-trained, every muscle at rest, ready. He hadn't come to reminisce. He'd come to warn. You've got 5 days, he said, glancing toward the window. After that ... it's not up to me anymore. I wanted to laugh or scream or feel something, but I couldn't. My hands felt foreign. My thoughts were slowing down, as if trying to process an equation that refused to resolve. You're still not on the active cut list, he added, softer this time. Yet. Then he handed me something. Not a weapon, not a file. Key dot small, rusted, engraved with a number. 1127. I stared at it, waiting for an explanation. All he said was, if you want to know who signed it, use that, but be sure you want to know. He stepped back toward the door, didn't look over his shoulder, just said, don't contact me. You already did. And then he was gone, like he'd never been there, like Saigon had never happened, like none of this had. Closed the door, locked it then checked the chain. Twice, I stared at the key for an hour before setting it down. I still don't know what's behind that lock, but someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure I could find out, and someone else ... is counting on the fact that I won't. I waited until morning ... not for courage, just daylight. There's something about fire in the dark that feels ... ceremonial, dangerous, too final. But in the morning, things can still pretend to be reasonable, even destruction. I pulled the envelope from its hiding place under the loose tile. The paper had started to curl at the edges, absorbing moisture, or maybe fear. My fingers trembled as I opened it for the last time. The names were still there, so was mine, but now something else clung to the page's memory. They no longer read like information. They read like a confession, one I hadn't meant to write. Opened the window, let the air inside. Then I lit the stove old gas flame. Blew steady. I tore the pages slowly, one by one. Watched them catch. Watched the ink blur and curl and die. Watched each name disappear into flame, as if I could undo it all just by letting it burn. The last page took longer. The paper twisted, fought the fire. I had to press it down with the metal tongs I used for cooking. There was no ceremony, no closure. Just smoke. Thick, acidic, uncooperative. I coughed hard. Tears stung my eyes. Not from sadness, from chemicals. And still, I couldn't look away. When it was done, I swept the ashes into a metal bowl, took it to the sink, turned on the tap, watched the water turn gray, watched the particles dissolve and swirl like ghosts. That wouldn't stay buried, but the smell lingered. Paper and ink in memory. Burning doesn't clean everything. Some things lodge in you. I sat at the table with my hands open. They were wet, not from the sink, from sweat, from something deeper. I realized I'd been clenching my fists the whole time, like I'd been holding on to something that refused to leave. The list was gone, but I could still see it. Every name, every date, every unfinished X. And mine, still waiting. Later that afternoon, I walked outside. Thought the fresh air would help. It didn't. Berlin always carries the scent of unresolved things. Dust, concrete, cheap perfume, rotten leaves. Like a city waiting for the next betrayal. I passed a man with a briefcase standing too still. He didn't follow me, didn't speak, but he watched. That was enough. I turned a corner, walked into a small cafe I didn't recognize, and ordered something hot I didn't need. I sat near the window, let the light hit my face, felt the warmth, faint and meaningless. Burning the list hadn't erased. It dotted it, sealed it, branded it into me, like I'd become the last remaining copy. The woman behind the counter smiled at me when I left. A simple, tired smile. I almost told her about the names, the smoke, the envelope, but I didn't, because some things, once spoken, don't stop echoing. That night, I dreamed of the river, the bridge, the key dot and the sound of paper catching. Fire dot, but in the dream, the pages didn't burn, they multiplied. I go back sometimes dot to Bahnhof Zoo, dot not often, not on schedule, just dot 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 when the wait gets too loud. When the ghosts rattle around the apartment and I need to sit somewhere that remembers them too. They replace the benches. All of them dot clean steel now. No splinters, no secrets. The wood is gone burned, probably. Sterilized out of history, like everything else we did. I sit near track 3. I never bring anything with me. No books, no cigarettes. Just my coat and the quiet. I watch the trains come and go. People too. They don't see me. I've become a fixture. Part of the background. Sometimes I imagine another envelope under a new bench. Different paper. Same weight. And someone else young, unaware finding it, thinking it's just the beginning of something. They never realize it's the end. A boy sat next to me last week, early 20s. Backpack, headphones, clean shoes. He glanced at me like I was someone's grandfather. I almost told him to run. Not from me, from this place. He left with his music still playing. Unbothered. I stayed. I always stay longer than I should. Because every time I go, I wonder if this is the day. If someone will sit beside me and say the word. The word that means I'm no longer waiting. Or maybe I'm not waiting for someone. Maybe I'm waiting for a train. The one that never comes. I remember the sound it made. The one I boarded after my first drop. The screech of metal. The warm stink of oil and breath. I was 26, green but stubborn. They told me I was good. I wasn't. I was just empty enough to follow orders. Now I sit with those same orders rattling in my head. The list is gone. The pages are ash. But the names didn't leave. One of them is still mine. Maybe they forgot. Maybe someone higher up decided it was cleaner this way. Let time do what bullets used to. Or maybe the list is still active, still moving, still watching. And one day, someone else will carry an envelope with my name on it, neatly typed. No check mark, no X, just a date. Not today. But someday. Until then. I wait. At the same bench. Different metal. Same silence. And every time I hear that train's whistle, I wonder if it's finally mine. The key he gave me is still here. I keep it in a drawer I never open, wrapped in a handkerchief that once belonged to someone I can't name anymore. I haven't used it, not because I'm afraid of what I'll find, but because part of me already knows. Some nights, I wake up before dawn and swear I hear a door unlock somewhere below me. A quiet click, the hum of old metal giving way, but nothing follows. No footsteps. No voice. Just the city breathing, like it's keeping time. I don't chase it, not anymore. Some things, once found, take more than you're willing to give. So I leave. The drawer closed. Let the silence decide when it wants to speak. And maybe one day. I'll turn the key. Maybe. If you made it this far, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, did you already know stories like this existed?